What's up, Ramblers? Your favorite CEO is back. And before we begin today's podcast, make sure you hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode. And follow Assistance HQ and Offsource HQ across all platforms to stay up to date on the latest content, updates, and more. And remember, if you need a virtual assistant, visit us at offsource.tech. Now, before we begin, a word from our sponsor. Hey guys, welcome back to another wonderful episode of The Ramblings. I am your host, Angelo Roberts. I have today with us Stan Peake of FSQ Consulting, and we are in for another groovy podcast. How are you doing today, Stan?
Fantastic, Angelo. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to just having a great chat with you as always, my friend.
Absolutely. So me and Stan have networked and kind of connected with each other, and it's been really great vibes and connections. He's introduced me to some really great people. And so one of the very first things we always start off with is give us your background, your story. And again, we like the long version. Give us how you got into consulting, why that even is your choice. Was that something that you always wanted to do? Was entrepreneurship always on your mind? And how did you end up there where you are today?
Oh, I love it. Well, if you want the long version, I always joke that I got into executive coaching not because I have an IQ of 200 and sold $1 billion company. More so, it's because of a PhD in the School of Hard Knocks. So real quick, even before my first career, football was my first passion. Loved it. I was a skinny kid who got bullied. And so the whole reason I picked up weights is because I was just sick of being bullied. And football gave me a really positive outlet for that. Well, let's face it, that pent up aggression. Loved it, but an injury in my second year university pretty much ended my football career. I almost broke my neck. So at that point, one door closes, but as cliche as that sounds, another one opens.
Right.
I had learned I learned a lot about exercise technique. Like I said, going from a skinny kid to eventually playing linebacker at the University of Calgary. And then I had to learn a lot more, not just about technique, but about rehabilitating injuries when I was in traction for a couple of weeks. So that actually made me pretty competent fitness trainer. I was already studying kinesiology. And so I started my first career and actually started my first business at 21 years of age.
Oh,
loved it. I had a lot of wonderful experiences, got into public speaking through that platform, something I'm still doing today, and just learned a ton.
What was that business specifically?
It was my first business was called Peake Performance Fitness and Health. Yes, play on words. You got it. It just writes itself. The marketing was really easy. I love that. It was a great learning experience. I had a job at the time, and I was going to school full time, and I was running this business.
Oh my gosh.
And still managed to have a good time on Friday and Saturday nights at least.
How did you balance? Like, what was it like to be at 21 years old balancing a full grown man adult kind of schedule with running a business, working, and school full time?
Well, it's a great question you ask, and I'm a big believer that balance it's kind of a facade. I think when we think of life balance, we picture somebody else who's got all their stuff figured out. And they're juggling all their priorities, and they've just got this existence where we're enviable. We're envious of them because we think that they've got time in the day to see their friends, work enough to pay the bills, enjoy pursuits, and. Like somebody's got their life figured out. My experience is that's rarely the case. Someone who's got even retired people, friends of mine that are retired talk about how busy they are. And so if you can be that busy in retirement, then the whole notion of having all your SH figured out while you're working full time and trying to better yourself is a complete facade. So to me, life balance is about sacrifice and choice. So right now in this moment, I'm choosing to be with you.
Right.
And that is a choice. That also means there's a sacrifice. Right now, I could be on the phone trying to grow the business. I could be coaching a client. I could be going out for exercise. There's always a choice about how we spend our time.
Right.
So anyone that says we don't have enough time in the day is probably an entrepreneur, number one, or an executive. Joking aside, there is never enough time in the day to do it all. So it always comes down to making deliberate choices of what matters to you most, knowing that you're sacrificing some other stuff.
Right.
In my life right now, number one thing that suffers is my social life. I do see my friends, but I see them on a pretty infrequent basis. Some I see more than others. Obviously, that's everybody. But growing a business, being a dad, being a husband, there's a lot of roles that start to compete for your time.
Right.
This is another reason why I think it's so important to be friends with, to some degree at least, those people that are also land in your work life, whether it's someone like yourself who, is an associate, maybe it's a client, maybe it's coworkers. I happen to be really fortunate. I'm friends with all three of my co-founders in FSQ Consulting. They're amazing people. I can't imagine doing that with anybody else. And to their credit, they put up with me.
So did 21-year-old you know this, or is this something that you just felt and it was like you kind of put a word to it later?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of connecting the dots backwards, paraphrasing Steve Jobs. And at the time, what I did know was sacrifice. And I know that even earlier. When I was in high school, I wanted to chase girls, but I also was in the weight room and I was on the football field. So there was a sacrifice. Something that mattered to me had to take a back seat to something that mattered more. I've always been very goal oriented. When I was 21, I did have a good time. I had a good social life. I was, out with my friends, but I worked Saturdays as well. I would work 6 days a week. And so Friday nights, I pulled the pin pretty early, and I had roommates at the time that would often be partying until much later. So nothing to make me feel like a really old 21-year-old back then to tell my roommates to keep it down, because some of us have to wake up at 6:30 in the morning for work on a Saturday. But
that's a
sorry.
very hard work ethic to have at 21. Now, as you graduate and start moving into your next jobs and other businesses, how do you feel that core, right? Because I feel like college years define your habits that you're going to carry on for life, because it's very hard to break them once you leave, because things are all thrown at you at one time. How do you feel that that core years at college, that you were able to develop that really, really hard work ethic? How did that parlay into your future businesses in your first career out of college?
It's a great line of discussion here. I believe that your college actually doesn't define, it exposes your habits.
Mm,
So a lot of people can coast through high school. Some can. I did okay in high school. I got good enough grades to get into university. And then my first semester, I was working and playing football and having fun. And so I had a 2.0 grade point average, which actually put me on academic probation. So that meant if I kept it up, I was off the football team. That meant, I wasn't going to go very far. So I had to pull my socks up. I had to get better habits. And again, this is sacrifice and choice. Something that mattered to me was at risk. So I had to level up. I had to get rid of whatever was in my way, and I had to put in the hours. And at first it was not efficient. This is pre-internet days, not to date myself, but we're talking 1996 was 95, 96 school year was my first year university.
oh,
And so the internet existed, but it wasn't to the degree that it is today. We would search stuff. Your audience is going to have to Google this. When we wanted to Google stuff back then, we used something called microfiche. Just Google it. I won't waste people's time.
I thought you were going to say Ask Jeeves at least.
No, we're talking pre-Yahoo, pre-everything.
Oh, wow.
So I had to put in the hours. There's lots of time I wouldn't leave the university till about 10 p.m. Even when I was playing football, I'd work in the morning, then I'd go to school. I'd get my workout in. There'd be a team meeting. You'd watch film and understand your opponent coming up. Then you'd have practice. Then I'd go to work. And so typically I'd be up around 5 or 6 a.m. and I wouldn't get home until 10:30. And if I had any homework, that means I'm not in bed till midnight.
Right.
So just there weren't enough hours in the day However, by blocking out everything else and just doing exactly what I needed to, you never had enough time. But I actually went from academic probation to the dean's list. And then the first semester after that, that I didn't have football, that was one less thing. You'd think I would be more productive. No, I wasted time. So I really do believe that when you're flat out busy, it exposes your habits. And if success matters to you enough, you develop better habits through trial and error, through intention, by modeling those people that you see their success and you'd like to emulate it. There's a lot of processes that we can use to level up, but those are some of the things that I did. And to your point about how that served me later in my career, I'm a huge advocate and believer in habits and routines. I've got a morning routine. I've got a routine about how I tackle my to-do list. I've got a routine about how I book meetings. I've got a routine. Like, it's not everything a routine. I'm not a robot. But I do believe that structure creates freedom. The more disciplined I am, the more ordered my schedule is, then I can have free space and use it for unstructured time. Go out, go for a walk, think, or say, you know what? I'm gonna watch a movie right now just because I have time. Or yes, I can close my laptop at 2 p.m. and not feel guilty. That happens extremely rarely, by the way, but the fact is structure does create freedom.
Absolutely. Now, you had also mentioned that you were able to sell $1 billion company. How do we
No,
go?
I said I wish. I said I wish I was an executive coach because I had an IQ of 200 and sold $1 billion company. I have sold a company, but not for $1 billion.
Not for a billion, but you've
The
still sold
reason,
companies.
yeah, that was anything I've ever done in my career is a result of team. So I had a business partner who actually founded that company. I bought in, so giving credit where credit's due. Um, but the reason I'm a coach through that first career in fitness was I took a lot of the work ethic from being that skinny kid who had to work harder than other people to put on muscle, and a lot of the not giving excuses that I learned through that period of my life. And then one of my early mentors, who's now a business partner, Matt Young, that philosophy, that attitude of not having excuses and just putting in the work to achieve your goals. Actually, before I knew it, through my first 18-year career in health and fitness and wellness, I didn't realize that I was coaching for almost 20 years.
Right.
So by the time I decided, but after we sold that second business, and I was, scratching my head, wondering what I wanted to do when I grew up, it turns out that I'd been coaching the previous 20 years almost, and I'd always been passionately curious about business. I'm in the potential business. I look at a person, I look at a business, and I see what they are, but also what they can be. And
Right.
that's what I love, is to help someone become the best version of themselves and to help a business become what it can be in terms of leveraging up its value proposition and being of the greatest value to its ideal audience. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning.
I want to get into some choppy waters because that's actually extremely good. Because the reason I love and had you explain your particular backstory, obviously, because I kind of already knew some of it, is because in your particular story, especially when we relate it to today, we see a lot of young 20-year-olds trying to be life coaches, right? And so through the pandemic, we have seen a boom, as you have even noted yourself, of even just the term of people calling themselves coaches. But you, as someone who has actually changed their life at a very young age and was able to be on a very rigorous and strict path and then continue to parlay that into your career, makes you pretty formidable in regards to actually being a real coach. So what I would like to ask you, and we're gonna use that to kind of follow through, is what do you make, or what do you have as your criteria for what you call a legitimate coach outside of sports, obviously?
Yeah, absolutely. I love this question because coaching is an unregulated industry. That's one of the biggest problems in my industry. And any industry, like my previous career, fitness, that is unregulated, what happens is it creates a buyer beware scenario. So let's say that, by the way, like there's nothing stopping you. The moment we hit, finish on this podcast, You could sit there and hang a shingle and say, I'm a business coach now. It's not illegal. You can't be sued. It's way different than I just can't say that I'm a doctor, right?
Right.
But you can say that you're a coach. And the problem is people looking for a coach, there's no manual that says, here's how to hire a business coach. You're left to your own devices.
Right.
And so you go to who you know. That's 74% of all purchase decisions across all industries begin with a referral. So it's not like people know how to search for a business coach. They look at their own network and they start asking their friends, hey, I'm thinking of hiring a coach. Do you know anybody?
Mm.
So that shrinks the world a little bit, but there's nothing that says that your inner circle is going to refer you to someone good.
Right.
Maybe that person is a smooth talker. Maybe they're really influential and they can sell whatever, the expressions, ice to someone who lives in the far north or whatever the case may be. But the fact is, if they're just a smooth talker and there's nothing to back it up, now all of a sudden that person believes that coaches are full of it and they're ruined on the experience. So having that context in place, what I believe makes a great coach is a few things. First and foremost, lived experience. So if you're a business coach and you're coaching entrepreneurs, you had better have owned and operated at least one successful business. One probably makes you dangerous. A good
When I
executive.
say operate, I want the reason I asked is because I'm going to relate it to sports, and
Yeah,
I want to get your opinion on that. When you say operate, do you mean in an executive capacity or a strict owner capacity?
it could be either. Maybe it's a solopreneur. Maybe you have a drop shipping company, but you had to figure out logistics. You had to figure out a product that's in demand. You had to figure out sourcing. You had to figure out how to keep your costs down. You had to figure out the cost of customer acquisition and how to grow lifetime value and average order size. All those things through challenge and lived experience has made someone a capable owner operator of that business. Now, if that's the only business they've ever run, it's not a bad thing, but maybe that doesn't qualify them to coach someone trying to run a service-based business.
Mm.
So someone who's in that case run a drop shipping company might not be the right coach for someone who wants to start their own restaurant. In this case, you might want to look at a restaurateur who's done it successful times in different concepts, because now they didn't just hit it out of the park with one concept. Maybe now they understand different concepts, different price points, different locations. They start to understand all the key levers that are involved in that particular industry. So that is all under the banner of lived experience. The second thing I look for in a good coach is someone who is professionally certified, someone who is not doing this off the side of their desk. They believe in the industry enough and they have enough reverence, if you will, for the field that they went to get a professional certification. And there's many. We could go through a whole bunch, but one that many people might know is ICF, the Institute. Sorry, I'm drawing a blank here all of a sudden. International Coaching Federation. Sorry, not
Okay.
Institute. There's a lot of different ones. CTI, the Coactive Training Institute. There's a number of different coaching certifications out there. But the fact is, if someone's not certified, then that means that they have not been necessarily trained in the principles of coaching.
Okay.
They might know business, but they might not know how to create psychological safety. They might not know the difference between questioning and giving advice. And they might be just good enough to be dangerous as a coach, because you can be dangerous as a coach. One example, if I was coaching you and you were starting a business and it came down to discovering your purpose, that's an example where a coach should never give advice. The purpose is one of the most powerful concepts we have. That's our compelling why. And it's really important, even though it's not easy, that we've let someone come up with that themselves. We can ask all kinds of questions. We can facilitate. We can give tools. But if I were to even hint at what your purpose might be, I might mislead you for a decade down the wrong road.
Okay. So being a very fundamentally sound coach is something that you look for the fundamentals, right? And so one of the things that I would like to ask is how do you differentiate, especially in your very first point of actually having done it, a student of the game? So, for example, if you were to, as someone who played sports, when you look at coaches that are phenomenal coaches that they themselves have not played at the level that they're coaching at, how do you then relay that in the same way as life or business where the results are not as black and white, right? Where do you differentiate and draw the line between the coach and the person that is supposed to be actually following and how well they follow the instructions of the coach?
Yeah, it's a great question. So staying in the athletic arena, I'm a big football fan. So let's use the NFL as an example.
Hmm.
You look at a guy like Andy Reid, who's one of the most successful coaches of our time. If you just look at Andy Reid, he doesn't exactly look like a former football player. However, he's a brilliant football mind.
Hmm.
And what fundamentals does he have? The guy puts in the work. If you want life balance, going back to our earlier conversation, don't become a professional sports coach. You've got no life balance. It
Right.
is not a seasonal sport. What happens with those NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, any of those coaches, they're working 16 to 20-hour days during the season. And they have a little bit better life balance when they only work 8 to 10-hour days during the off season.
Right.
Because it's at that level, you have to understand the scheme. It's a chess match. You have to understand the scheme of the other team. You have to, every week, you've got 1 week from the time you leave the field from your last opponent till you take the field for your next opponent to understand the intricacies of how they game plan, what they do. Again, a football example, what they do offensively, what they do defensively, understanding their tendencies. So over and above being in front of your team, executing your plays, you have to watch so much film to understand what your opponent is doing.
Hmm.
And I don't think it's different in any other sport. You could be a boxing manager and you're looking at watching 3, 4, 5 fights of your opponent's previous matches. So you understand what their tendencies and strong suits are as you develop a strategy on how you're going to customize your go to battle plan with that individual. So in that example, again, it's Usain Bolt's the fastest person on the planet. Would he become a great running coach? Maybe, but there's a difference between skill set, competence, and the ability to bring out the best in others.
Right.
So the best athletes don't always make the best coaches, just like the best entrepreneurs don't always make the best business coaches, or the
Mhm.
best executives don't always make the best executive coaches. So I think that's going back to your question about what makes a great coach. There's a third layer beyond lived experience and being certified, and that is your motivation. Are
Mm.
you doing it to be a success? Is it all about you, or is it all about the person you're coaching? I've had people compare me to Tony Robbins, and as much as that's a compliment, that's not my goal at all. I don't want to be like Tony Robbins. Not that there's anything wrong with being him, absolutely
Right.
not.
I was gonna say,
But
like, oh,
no, the guy's a massive success. But I think a lot of people who try to be the next Tony Robbins are just chasing the success. They're not chasing what he did to get there. That
right.
guy would not have gotten to where he is if it was all about him.
Mhm.
And you can tell that because I've seen him live. When he's with people, he's with people.
Right.
People aren't with him. Do you understand what I mean about the difference?
Yes, because like it's you could be in a room full of people and it's just we're here, where it's just me and you, and I am focused on you. The audience can be there, they're here to witness, but I'm not here to show them. I'm here to help you in this particular moment right now. They just happen to also be watching at the same time.
Well, that's just it. And so when we show up to be of service, and that's what I mean about motivation, then you bring out the best in other people, and it's all about them.
Mhm.
There's a lot of people who are more concerned about their personal brand,
Right.
and they make you feel small. A great coach should never make you feel small because they're so great. A great coach should make you feel elevated because they see your potential and they hold up a mirror and they say, Angelo, you're thinking small, man. Why
Mhm.
would you set your goal here when you're capable of this?
Right.
And not they're blowing smoke, where, but because they legitimately see your capability and they challenge limiting beliefs and they help you to understand what's possible. That's what a great coach does. They don't just toot their own horn and say, I wrote this book and I did this. So,
Mm.
so
I,
that's what I mean about having that motivation in the right place.
I want to ask now, right? So, like I was going back to before, in basketball, it's very, very black and white, where you can see the improvements of a coach based on numbers and things of that nature. In life and in business, obviously you have numbers, but it's going to be a little bit different. How do you differentiate where to draw the line of the execution from the person that's being coached versus the coach may not be a fit for that particular person?
Well, fit is a huge aspect of coaching, whether it's in the sports arena or business coaching, executive coaching, because the fact of the matter is you have to be able to feel safe with that person. And in the sports world, sometimes we get away from that a little bit because people are chasing their dream of playing professionally or playing for a championship. And
Mhm.
so I think, unfortunately, in the community, especially the community ranks of sports, we tend to cut coaches far too much slack. Abuse in all forms of sport should never be allowed.
Mm.
And in positions of power, sometimes those coaches will abuse that power. So, and I think rightfully so, in the advent of social media and just changing priorities of a generation, coaches are being held to a different account. And it doesn't matter how many championships you won in the past, coaches that don't relate to their players will lose a locker room. And you
Right.
see it at every level in every sport. When it comes to business coaching or executive coaching, the difference is you're not on a school team or a community team. You're paying out of your own pocket
Hmm.
oftentimes to work with someone who, in exchange for your time and your money, is supposed to make you a better version of yourself.
Right.
If you don't gel with that person, if you don't trust that person, if you don't generally like that person, you're not going to get the results because you're not fully present in the moment.
Mm.
And so fit is huge. You might, maybe you're a restaurateur. We use that example. And maybe you've got a coach who's run 50 restaurants and grown lots of them to be international chains. But if they're an a-hole and you don't relate to that person, they're not going to help you get some other levels of success because the dynamic, the fit is so important because you really need someone. In many cases, your coach is the only person who you can be fully vulnerable, fully raw with. And oftentimes they're the only person in your life you've told a few things to in terms of your fears, your goals, and what might be holding you back.
Now, the reason I had you on the podcast is because you hold a very unique and specific expertise within this coaching industry. And now you have a team of, I believe you said, I want to say 37
You,
coaches.
you nailed it. 37. Good memory.
There we go. 37 coaches, which means you've probably had to have vetted at least over 100 coaches in order to meet your criteria of who is going to be on your team and represent your name. What is the quickest way that a coach can lose your either respect or your blessing, if you will, that they would want that you'd want them to carry your name?
It's a lack of self-awareness would be the number one thing. And if I could explain that, when I mean self-awareness as a coach, I want a coach, if they're going to work for us, they have to be damn good and they have to know what they're damn good at and for whom. So one question I ask every coach who's ever worked for us and who ever will work for us, as I will say, who's your ideal client and how is their life different 6 months from now as a result of working with you? And so that coach has to not just have a couple of hours, they should have a few years of experience in helping people because that's what it takes to whittle through. Angelo's a good fit for me, but I was able to help so and so way more, or other way around. When you help lots of different people, which is usually the process, some people you're able to help naturally and it feels easy. You feel like we talked about athletes, athletes talk about being in the zone.
Right.
And so as a coach, if you feel like you're in the zone and the person you're coaching is like, oh my gosh, you are the best. This is amazing. Now you know you're in your zone of brilliance. And
Mm.
if you move over a couple of lanes, You're no longer in your zone of brilliance. You're maybe in the zone of competence. People don't pay damn good money for competence. They
Right.
want to pay for brilliance because and not just your brilliance. If you're a coach, they want to pay for someone to unlock their own brilliance that's been sitting idle. And
What?
so a
How,
coach,
how do you define that brilliance, right? Like, because I was just thinking, like stat padding, right? Like, as like you can have lost the game and padded your stats. How do you, as a coach, if you are a good coach, but let's say you're not necessarily good at the marketing aspect, you're great at business, DevOps, all the other stuff, but marketing's not necessarily your strong suit. And let's say you are a great coach, but you're not hitting the mark of the people that you should be affecting. How do you differentiate between a like that coach that is good, that is just not currently in the market of the people that he needs to be able to help, versus a coach that is almost all fluff, where you go to a conference and you see all of these people that are giving keynote speeches. I'm sure you've been to different conferences where you see the keynote speaker and they're like basically regurgitating a whole bunch of useless information. Everyone is clapping, everyone loves it. They're like, oh, they feel like their life has changed and everything. They're like, oh, I want to take their course and everything. But fundamentally, nothing has happened. Yet there are coaches that are amazing and brilliant that are not in front of the people that they need to. How do you switch that?
two things come to mind. Number one, how I know the difference in fluff is the testimonials.
Mm,
So if somebody is beloved, then it's going to be all the times they appeared in press and all the stuff. It's all about them. Now, a lot of people who are a best kept secret, we'll get to that. Their testimonials would be like, Angelo changed my life. And it wouldn't be fluff. The testimonial would be dynamite of a measurable outcome that anybody would want.
mm,
Right. So and so helped me gain my confidence back. Angelo helped me grow my business by 50% in 1 year. Like those are amazing testimonials that people don't make up. Let's assume that someone's not going to put a lie on their website.
right.
Now we talk about the difference in the lack of skill of marketing. It, one of the biggest hangups in service-based professionals, doctors, nurses, therapists, physiotherapists, fitness trainers, coaches, one of the biggest challenges that they have is that they only want to serve. That doesn't sound like a challenge. When it becomes a challenge is that somebody who is born to serve, when it comes to selling their service, marketing their service, talking about what they do for others, they feel like they are bastardizing the integrity of what they do.
Correct.
There's like a lot of coaches feel like if they're too good at marketing, then they are snake oil salespeople.
Right. And now they start to feel like that fluff person. Like it's like that's
That's
not
right.
I want to be so far away from that that I kind of
Exactly.
hurt myself.
And then a fellow coach, not one of our coaches, but a coach that I know and respect out there. Again, credit where credit is due. The guy's name is Mike Joseph. His view is that the best coaches can sell, because if you can sell, then you've got a steady stream of clients. If you've got a steady stream of clients, what does that look like? You're getting lots of coaching hours. Lots of coaching hours. It's like exercise, and it's reps. Who's going to have the strongest build? Someone who's been in the gym the most hours, most likely. And some of the best coaches are the people who have put in the hours coaching. If you're not selling, you're either coaching lots for free or you're struggling. 75% of all coaches work less than 7 billable hours a week for that very reason.
Now, so how do you, I guess, gain that experience? Because like we said, we always know that 10,000 hour mark is what it takes to become like a master. And if
Yep.
you want to help people and be the best version of yourself, essentially with like those first people before you become a true master are not going to get the best version of you.
That's right.
How do you like what that's hard for me as someone
I,
as like who would say, I would like to go get a coach. If you're not in your 10,000 hours, like if you're still within your 10,000 hours, I'm not even getting the best version of you.
right.
So how do you as a coach balance a person like me, someone who might be skeptical, it's their first time, they might have gotten burned before by a coach. How do you balance someone's high level expectations, especially if they got burned, right? They're looking for they're looking for results tomorrow, basically, right? They want you to change their life like that. How do you balance those expectations with your ability to be able to then deliver on those expectations?
It's such a good question. So I'll just share my journey because that's all I can really speak to. When
Mhm.
I started out in coaching, I decided to call 3 entrepreneurs I knew and coach them for free for several months. And these were people I wasn't planning on selling to. They were friends and they weren't going to take horrible advice just because I was their coach.
Right.
So it was kind of a no risk offer on both sides. What it allowed me to do was make sure I made mistakes early, absolutely. But I also worked through my process and I got lots of hours. I agree with you. I know you're referencing Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hour rule to mastery. What is not talked about is the learning curve that happens. The learning curve is much sharper early. So
Mm.
you're going to learn way more in year one. Let's just say that it's equal, easy math, takes 10 years to get to those 10,000 hours. You're
Right.
going to learn faster and therefore potentially learn more in year one than you are going to learn in year 10.
Yeah. Oh,
If
yes.
you're
Oh my gosh.
right,
No one talks about the progression of learning being much, much harder as you then dive into it much more because, like, that information is not as accessible because fewer people have even gotten to that point.
that's right. That's right. So by coaching people for free, I learned a ton early and that made me better. That made me a little bit more competent. And then I just started doing it. Now I started after maybe several months, about a half year, then I started charging people and I charged a lower, I wanted my foot in the door. So my price was probably about proportionate to about the value I was creating. At least now, sometimes you're creating multiples of value for what you charge. I remember relatively early on, there was a company that I helped, and they ended up increasing their revenue by 150% in a year. So they more than doubled their revenue in 1 year, and they were getting what a bargain
Ah,
back then. Yeah,
what?
and
Tell
so,
people
but
what was that bargain because they're doing 150% of revenue. What were you charging? And
yeah, well, I don't remember exactly what I charged, but I did work out the math that for every dollar they spent with me, they got $75 back in revenue. So there was a 75 to 1 ROI. By the way, I think that's another thing that's important for coaches, especially business coaches who
Mhm.
are dealing with entrepreneurs who are really watching their runway, is you got to be able to figure out your ROI. If you're an expense, no, you're done. But if you're an investment, any entrepreneur would be wise to hire you as a coach. So if you can demonstrate that you can compress success timelines, make good things happen faster, or if you can help them reduce their expenditures, therefore become more profitable, and if you can help them raise revenues, if you can do all three of those things, increase revenue, decrease expenses, and speed up the clock, you're a miracle worker. Now, there's no such thing as a miracle worker that works every time. But for a lot of cases, especially an early, never been an entrepreneur before, first time entrepreneur who's reaching out to someone who's got the lived experience we talked about, who's certified, who's in it for the right reasons, who truly cares about their client's success, that is a potent combination, big time.
Mm. Man, oh my gosh. I am really enjoying this conversation. I want to get into something a little difficult to talk about, right? There's bad coaches everywhere, right?
Yep.
Sometimes you feel the need to call these people out. What has been an experience for you where you felt compelled to speak out against another coach because it just did not sit right in your spirit?
I never have. I've never called out another coach by name. I feel like that
Well,
triggers
not doesn't
lists.
have to be by name, but
Okay. Yeah.
even if it's been in a meeting, like, hey, like, for example, right? I've been in certain situations where I've been in meetings where we're talking about co-working spaces and different kind of like accelerator programs. And there's one particular accelerator program within a local area of mine that did something not so business polite to another person that's a smaller business, right? They hired this lady, she was working, and then they kind of basically took her stuff and said, you're gone. And still to this day, use her particular methods that she brought to that particular organization. Right. And so she was said basically like, I don't care who you work with. I just do not recommend doing business with that particular organization. And so sometimes you have those within coaching as well. And it's like, hey, I don't care if you don't use me, but this is just someone who I would not recommend. You can, like, I am wary. Like a rule of mine is I say, if as a developer, if you make your client switch to WordPress, that is the most scammy thing I feel like you can do because you are trying to force them to pay a continual monthly basis of money because WordPress is probably one of the hardest platforms to learn, which means it's the hardest platform for a regular business owner to go in and make very, very small changes in it. It's kind of like they're trying to trap you into like
They keep
forcing them
using
to
their services.
keep using their services. And
Yeah.
I hate that. And so I say, anytime a designer forces you to switch to WordPress, be very, very wary of that. So
No, that's a good
in
point.
your world, what are some of the things that you would tell people to be wary of? And has there been a situation where you had to like let someone know to be wary of a different organization?
Yeah. Anytime it's about the coach, not about you. So for us, we make sure it's very intentional. We have flexible payment options. We always tell people if we don't see line of sight towards ROI, towards return on investment, happy to not only stop working together, even refund the investment if people feel like they weren't getting what it was worth. You should any good coach, especially the coaches, not just entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurs or executives. I said it before. For any client to work with a coach, there's two fees. They're paying twice. They're paying with their time and they're paying with their money. So if I take your time and your money this hour
Mhm.
and I don't give you anything in return, then you should know that. You should spidey sense tingling, wonder what you're getting. Any good coach should take your time, take your money, but put you back into your life, back into your business, more focused with a renewed perspective, perhaps a brand new perspective, and maybe even a set of strategies on how you can accomplish your most important goals. And a great coach would hold you accountable to that.
Mm.
They don't just talk about it. They would say, okay, Angelo, last time you talked about this, this, this. You said you were going to do it. Tell me, did you do it or didn't you? And why not?
Do you give repercussions if people don't like if you set a
Absolutely.
plan for them and they don't hit it? Like, do you just say, hey, you're like, if you don't hit these goals, we're going to cancel the services, no refunds because you did not do what you were supposed to do? Like, what is your criteria for having a good client?
If people miss the mark, I've never fired someone for not achieving their goal, but I have fired a couple clients for not doing the work.
Right. Okay.
I've missed goals a lot, and I do believe, like as entrepreneurs, Damon John says it, and I he's done well for himself, so I give him credibility marks. Successes fail more often than they succeed. So a lot of people that watch shows like Shark Tank wish they could get to that point in their career or wish they could be more like Damon John. But Damon John is saying, I'm not who you think I am. I'm
Right.
not someone like we talked about life balance. I'm not someone with all the answers. I'm just somebody who has accepted failure as part of the process. And I get up and I get my ass kicked and I get up again and again and again and again. That's a success. Because if you get up to the plate often enough and you get hit with the baseball and you strike out and you foul out and you just over and over and over again, but you keep getting up to bat,
Mhm.
that's the only way that you're almost guaranteed to have more successes. In fact, I track what I do every week. And one of the things that I track is STAW. What's the language rules on your podcast?
Go for it. I can edit.
Okay, perfect. So STAW stands for shit thrown against the wall. And when I say that, I mean, I throw shit against the wall. Maybe it sticks, maybe it doesn't.
Mhm.
Maybe we say spaghetti, but you don't have to edit that. Point is, Every week I do stuff that has a high likelihood of failure because I'm just going for the stratosphere. I've tried to reach out to do business with all kinds of different celebrities, politicians, world leaders, you name it. And a lot of times it fails, but sometimes it succeeds. And then people say, how did you do that?
Right.
Well, I'll tell you how I did it. There's 93 failures that you don't want to talk about for every 5 or 6 or 7 wins that you do want to talk about.
I want to get very soft and talk about something very sensitive for people very quickly. This is undoubtedly going to be probably one of the most important parts of this podcast. Failure comes in multiple ways. And in business, it can be very heavily intertwined with life, more so than when we were looking at sports. It's not like we leave it all on the court. It is very hard to leave it all at the door when in business, because business, sometimes you have a home office, sometimes you're doing a lot of things from home. And that failure may not come in the form of business. How, as a coach, do you handle someone that is successfully crushing it in business, yet their pitfalls in business are related to their personal life? And so,
Well, that's right.
to just add some context, let's say you crush it in business, you make the certain sacrifice to say give your kids a better life. That's what you wanted to do. But in turn, you did not get to spend that time with your kids. And so when giving your kids a better life, you no longer have like that time invested in spending with them, which is going to affect your relationship post 18. What does it, or even your partner, right? Like you might not have kids and you have a partner, and the the growth of your business deteriorated the relationship that you had with your partner. How do you as a coach come in and try and tie in it all together? Or do you just say, hey, you have to get a life coach for that? Like, in business, life and personal can be intertwined. And how do you do you separate? What do you do when your pitfalls are like is part of life and your personal?
Well, it just comes down to really, this is why I talked about earlier, having the right fit, someone who can create psychological safety, because you have to have some really real and raw conversations. One thing I like to ask people is what truly matters to them, because there's a big difference between success and fulfillment. And a lot of times we think success is like this finish line, like happily ever after, which is BS. There is no happily ever after in life. Maybe on our deathbed, if we reflect back and say that was a life well lived. Otherwise, there's another day, there's another hour, there's another challenge, there's another opportunity. And like, unlike sports, there's no off season in business.
Right.
So when we find out what truly matters to someone, what's usually and unfortunately often the case is there's a disconnect between what we say is important to us and what our actions would demonstrate.
Mhm.
We say family is the most important thing. And if I look at an executive's calendar, show me where family shows up in that calendar. Now, we default to calendars all work, this meeting, this meeting, this meeting, this meeting, to-do list. What about like a dinner with the Johnsons on Friday night? What about your kid's t-ball game or dance recital or spelling bee, whatever the case may be? If you're using your calendar for what you should to organize your priorities and make sure the most important things get done, then anyone's calendar would look like a blend. People use terms like work-life integration instead of
Mhm.
work-life balance because they think that's more attainable, but it's only attainable if we leverage best practices we use in our professional lives into our personal lives.
Mm.
Goal setting, achievement, habits, discipline, fundamentals, priorities, those things should show up at home too. Whether it's your exercise, your health, your nutrition, your sleep, your most important relationships. Again, not to be cliche, but one saying that hits home for me is the only people that are going to remember that you worked late 10 years from now were your kids. And I had that conversation with my son because I always pick him. Well, he's older now, but I would always pick him up after school. But a lot of times I'd pick him up after school, bring him home, and I might have to go back out for a meeting.
Mhm.
And my son, basically, I forget how many hours are in a week. It's 180 something. I think, let's say 188, I think, or something like that. I dropped my kid off at home and I was about to go back downtown. He goes, "You know what, Dad? I think there's 188 hours in a week. And I bet you work at least half of them." And I was just like, oh, that was a
That's
gut punch. That was a gut punch. And on the one hand, I'm happy that I'm modeling hard work and going all in, but I also want to make sure I'm never missing. Well, you're always missing. That goes back to the life balance. And it's always about sacrifice and choice. I do know that when my kid was younger and didn't understand these concepts, the answer was always yes. You want to play? Yes. And if he wanted to play Lego when he was 5 years old, when it was inconvenient, I would do it. And if it meant staying up till 11 or midnight to finish work, so be it. There'll always be work. Now, maybe the
right.
revenue doesn't grow as fast as you want it to, but I don't have a time machine. I can't go back to when my kid was younger and put in the time to create the relationship. And now, like, my son is a teenager, he's in high school, and yeah, he's a typical teenager, doesn't hang out with his friends. He's too cool for us. But we do have a good relationship and a solid foundation. And he tells us what's going on in his life. And you'll never get that as a teenager, as a parent, if you don't spend the time having tea parties or building Lego or teaching them to ride a bike or whatever else when they're kids. So,
Right.
long-winded way of saying that the only way we're ever going to get success and fulfillment is to do the self-work and understand what really matters to us. Don't wait until your spouse is changing the locks on the door to realize that that was the most important person in your life.
Right.
We know we got to build a business and it doesn't happen without us, but communicate. Tell them what's going on with you. Tell them what your goals are. And you know what? Make them a priority at least some of the time. There'll always be work, but every now and then work has to take a back seat. So you can take your spouse out, show them how much they matter to you, spoil them, and you don't even have to spend a lot. A lot of times spoiling them means making them the center of your universe and just giving them your undivided attention. Now, I'm not a marriage coach and I shouldn't be, but I do know that my wife and I are being together for 16 years and she could give you a long list of my faults, but she would also tell you first, like without a doubt, that I love her and that my family is very important to me.
You have made some amazing points that obviously social media is going to get, but as a whole, this has been a very fulfilling podcast. I won't use the word successful in this particular thing, even though it was successful. This has been very fulfilling. And so normally I kind of have like a pre-done question on what I would like to ask you before we sign off. However, I wanted to ask you something based on our conversation today, right? Would you say you are more fulfilled than successful, or would you say you are more successful than fulfilled?
It's a great question because I'm driven to a fault and I'm not very good at stopping to smell the roses. But I would say that I'm more fulfilled than successful. I like who I am. I love my friends. I love my family. I love my coworkers and our clients. I love what I do for a living, and I'm not jealous that I'm not so and so. I don't want to be anyone else. I don't want to do anything else. So I'm loving the journey. I'm loving the process. I'm just not where I want to be. And by the way, I've never met anyone that's exactly where they want to be. I've interviewed billionaires. I've interviewed millionaires, professional athletes, Olympic athletes. Nobody is where they want to be. Everybody's striving for more. So I'm more fulfilled than I am successful. But great question.
Oh man, that is a great way to end this. You have been such an amazing guest today, Stan. And listen, is there any okay? So before we actually the actual thing that we always ask everyone, shameless plug. You have without a doubt, if you have listened to this conversation, without a doubt, you understand Stan's expertise and level of professionalism when it comes to coaching. Where can we find FSQ Consulting? Give us a little bit about what FSQ Consulting is and where can we find you and everything, costs, everything. Like shameless plug yourself right now.
No, I appreciate it. Well, FSQ, which stands for F status quo, by the way, that's how we came up with the name. We can say forget, or it could be the other F. But FSQ exists because we believe that business must be a force for good. And we exist to help leaders develop, to step into their potential. Our goal is to help at least 1 million leaders realize their potential. And by the way, we can be found at getsuccessfaster.com, getsuccessfaster.com, all one word. In terms of our core offerings, we work with entrepreneurs to grow their business and understand what gets in the way of growth. And we work with leaders, from emerging leaders right up to the CEO and board of directors, to become more worth following and to create organizations that are healthier, more aligned, and more productive. That's what happens. We've heard all the cliches top down when it comes to culture, but it's true. And there is empirical evidence to show that well-constructed leadership development plans and coaching can actually improve profitability, productivity, and just morale and health of the organization. That's what we do. And our core programs are leadership development programs, one of the top ones out there. We've been recognized this year by Inc. magazine as one of only 6 companies in Canada to be awarded their Power Partner Awards. So we're thrilled to keep doing what we do for leaders and entrepreneurs all over the world. And yeah, I'm active on social media, or you can find us at getsuccessfaster.com. And thank you. Was here to chat with you and to really leave a mark in your audience. If we get to earn the business of anyone listening, that's our honor.
Absolutely. Listen, Ramblers, you have been so blessed today. I am so glad that I was able to interview with Stan, and we're signing off. Hey, Ramblers, that's it. Podcast is over. Don't leave yet, though. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast, and follow us on YouTube at OffSource HQ. We'll see you next time.